It can be hard to write a convincing ghost story without going obnoxiously over the top and compromising the surprise of the mystery. But if the elements of suspense, supernatural, and logic are balanced out just right, the story can remain intriguing even after you come back to it over 25 years later. Author Dennis Hamley has been practicing his craft for nearly 50 years, having written and published children's novels based around ghostly themes since 1976. But as a lifelong railway enthusiast, Hamley's also dabbled elsewhere. His 1993 fiction novel The Railway Phantoms plays on the elements of reality and curiosity with the popular ghost train tropes while referencing his interest in railway history and the growing trend of railway preservation societies in the UK at that time. The plot centers around 13-year-old Rachel as she reluctantly accompanies her divorced father during his working holiday, volunteering on a preserved section of the fictional North Western and Midland Junction Railway in West Yorkshire. But even before she's arrived, Rachel has recurring dreams of an event taking place back in the line's heyday when a goods train stops in the tunnel at the fictional town of Scarhead one dense foggy morning, only for a following express to be given a clear road to crash into the back of it. Now forced into spending a week in the setting of her recurring dream, Rachel quickly learns the accident in her dream really did happen, but what perturbs her most is the characters she sees during the event and how their story seems connected with the disaster, yet remains somewhat incomplete. Keen to see the back of her nightmares and illusions, Rachel, along with local kids Gail and Terry, go out of their way to revisit the scene of the crash and relive the events of people witnessing the disaster, including 2 kids roughly her age, the power-hungry stationmaster of Scarhead, and the local fogman who's blamed for the disaster but is found dead before he can be brought to trial. The question then is, did the fogman really try to avert disaster or not? And what's with the couple that Rachel spots travelling in the brake van? You can sense inspiration from the Hawes Junction collision of 1910 and L.T.C. Rolt's short story The Garside Fell Disaster from his Sleep No More collection of supernatural tales. But the Railway Phantoms manages to stand on its own by going beyond the basic ghost train aftermath, exploring Rachel's own psychological trauma following the distancing and breakup of her parents, which in turn links to her own resentment of the railway. And while she gently warms round to the railway aesthetics showing times gone by, childhood trauma prevents her progressing to full-on dedicated volunteer like her father. However, while unraveling the mystery surrounding the crash through the trackside worker's point of view, she finds herself asking why her father chose to work at this preserved railway in particular, only to learn there may be deeper family connections with the railway and in turn the disaster than her dream might have been letting on. The only minor criticism that might put some people off, and it is only minor, is some of the conversations have been written with a little too much back and forths of said character A, said character B, said character A, said character C, etc. It's fine in small doses and appropriate for the target market, but it might become a touch deterring for those who prefer their conversations left more open-ended. But don't let that put you off, because the key strengths of this story cast a shadow over any minor weaknesses. The dialogue itself doesn't talk down to anybody, as in it doesn't assume readers wouldn't know a detonator from a crab, but it also takes time to explain it without overcomplicating itself with elongated made-up words and convoluted sentences. Railway practice is played out as it would in real life, with explanations being made over naming different classes of engine to signalling and block working, but it manages to do so in a way that the average reader who wouldn't really care about railways can get to grips with the basics without getting completely lost. Rachel is on hand to represent those who don't understand railway enthusiasm, but her contemporary Terry manages to explain most railfan aspects by playing up the young, photo-snapping enthusiast who hasn't matured enough to show much empathy to anyone who doesn't get it. You can pretty much picture these characters in real life, which adds to the authenticity of the story. And with authenticity comes the sense of creepy atmosphere that makes up a good thriller. Railways in the northwest of England ran through remote places set far apart by hills and natural valleys which isolate major accidents from the nearest emergency help. Even in the late Victorian era, railway companies were getting to grips with space interval working instead of allowing trains into sections of track according to the clock. Having said that, the disaster took place at a time when points and signals were still in a position where they couldn't be completely fail-safe. And even if they were, human motivation is what caused the accident to take place, but who's to blame makes for an interesting twist that keeps you guessing through most of the story. There are no illustrations in the book beyond the cover and 2 maps showing the before and after of the featured railway, but the strength of the writing somewhat manages to overrule their necessity. All in all, The Railway Phantoms is a refreshing, easy-to-read ghost novel that, while geared more towards kids approaching adolescence, manages to present an interesting railway-related mystery without insulting anybody's intelligence. Second-hand copies are available, though not so lucrative due to the book itself being out of print for a while. Further inquiries can be made via Dennis Hamley's website linked in the description. And on a personal note, in a world of existing properties being adapted, remade, and reimagined for film and television, it's a crying shame that nobody has thought to pick this one up. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you liked what you hear and you'd like to see more on the channel, then feel free to like, share, subscribe, discuss, contribute to my Patreon, and check out my range of merchandise at www.egmedia.co.uk/shop. See you next time!